Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel on the college process. Once again, I'm Ed from Principia Prep, and today we're going to be going over the step-by-step guide for the FAFSA form. We're going to go through the entire form just to show you guys how to fill out the FAFSA form here. Now, obviously, already I'm on the FAFSA site here, but if you want to, down below here on the screen, you see I have the link, fafsa.ed.gov. This is where you guys need to go by clicking on the new student, the new to the FAFSA process here. We can click on that. We're going to get this screen welcoming us to the FAFSA form. And what you want to do is you have three ways of filling out the FAFSA form. You can either fill it out as a student or as a parent, or if you're helping a parent or family out, like a guidance counselor or something like that, you can do it as a preparer. It's up to you. I typically tell families, as long as the student is with you, even if the parent is filling out the form, perfectly fine. I always click on this one here that I am a student and I want to access the FAFSA. Now, if you're new to this process, the easiest way, the first thing you guys need to do is you guys need to create, down here, create the Fs Aid Ids. If you have not created the Fs Aid Ids, we have this video. I just posted the picture here, and in the description is the link. Please go to that video first, our Fs Aid ID step-by-step guide to create the FSA IDs. You need to create two FSA IDs, one for the student and one for the parent. The student's FSA ID is used to log into the FAFSA. So we're starting the form as the student. The second FSA ID is used as the parent halfway through the student's form that we're about to start here to basically upload your taxes, as well as at the end of the FAFSA for both the student and parent, both the IDs are needed to sign the form to submit it. Now, if you guys have already gotten the FSA IDs for the student and the parent, let's start right off by logging in as the student. Now, I already have an account set up as a student, so I'm gonna basically log in here. So I'm gonna click here first on login, and then what's gonna happen is the next page you're gonna see is the login screen. Now here, you guys can do a few things. You can either use the username that you created for the FSA ID, or the student's cell phone number, or the student's email that you use to create the FSA ID. All three things allow you to log in to your student's FAFSA form. So I'm gonna type in here my cell phone number, because everyone knows my cell phone number, obviously. I'm not gonna show you my username, but I'm gonna type in my cell phone number and my password here. And then we're gonna click on the login button to basically log us into the form. And now once we log into the student, the next thing you're gonna see is this disclaimer here, basically indicating the only person allowed to move forward in filling out this form is the student. Now, if you're helping out the student and filling this form out for the student on their behalf as a parent, fine, so we're gonna click on the accept button. Now, what you're gonna see on the next page is gonna ask you to confirm certain information like your email address, your cell phone number, your address, so on and so forth. That way, it can basically make sure that you have all the information in the system correctly done. This, by the way, is transfer over when you guys create the FSA ID. So you want to just go on here and just double check real quick, make sure everything is correct. And I'll go to the bottom here because I know all these numbers and everything else are correct. So I'll go to the bottom here. And at the bottom here, basically all you need to do is just check the I agree button right here. I agree, I agree. And then the next screen you're going to see, it's going to indicate here that both your information for your cell phone number as well as the email has been verified. That's basically when you guys created the FSA IDs. That's what that's showing here. So I'll just click on the continue button. Now, when you guys first create the FSA IDs, by the way, it does take typically around 48 hours to first name, last name, social, and birthday are correct within the world of the Social Security network, but it's perfectly fine. The moment you create your FSA IDs, you can go past this part here and start the FAFSA form. And the first time you do the FAFSA form, what you're gonna notice is gonna bring you back to this page here. I know you've already done it already, but we need to click on I am a student and want to access the FAFSA form, and then click on the continue button. And now what you're gonna see here is essentially a couple things. Right off the bat, at the bottom there, you're gonna see your FSA ID status. Now, once again, as I mentioned, if you just got the FSA ID for the student today, instead of saying matched and it's fine as far as showing a green, if it doesn't say that, if it says it's still verifying your information, it's perfectly fine to keep moving forward. It's not an issue. So whether you have that green down there or not, just keep moving forward with the FAFSA. Second, it's going to ask us if we want to complete one of two different FAFSA forms. Now, since this FAFSA form, this is for next academic year, 22-23, for the people filling out the form today, then you want to fill out this FAFSA here. If your student is in college right now, the 21-22 school year, and you didn't do the FAFSA before, then you need to do this FAFSA here. But since we're doing this form for the 22-23 FAFSA for next year's academic class for students looking for financial aid for next year, we'll be clicking on this box right here. Now, the next thing you're gonna see, the next box that pops up is it asks you for a save key. And a lot of people ask me how important a save key is. And the reality is the save key is not important at all. What I typically do for a lot of families here when I'm filling out the form is I just type the word in, save, and save. Reason being that the save key is never used again if you submit the form. Basically, every time you do the form again and log in again just to check stuff or make changes to FAFSA, it'll ask you for another save key. So you create another one. So the save key is only used essentially as if you're filling out the form and you get overwhelmed. I tell parents all the time, if you get overwhelmed with this, just hit the save button and come back. So if you get overwhelmed, hit the save button, and then when you come back in and log in as a student, it's going to ask you for your save key. And by the way, if you forget your save key for whatever reason, very simple. It's going to ask you for your zip code. So it's very easy. If you forget the save key, it's not that big of a deal. Now let's press continue. And then what you're going to notice is right now it's the introduction to the actual FAFSA. I know we went through a lot of different steps, but the first time you do this, it makes you go through all these different hurdles and just saying yes and agreeing to certain things. But the reality is this is the page right before starting the FAFSA. Now, what you can do is, if you want, you can go down here and basically click on all these and explain to you different aspects about the FAFSA form. Like what documents do you need, how long the form is, so on and so forth. For most families, I just tell them, just skip over this. You really don't need this. Now, obviously, when you start the FAFSA for senior parents today, as well as other parents doing this for students that are still in college, you want to have with you, obviously, the 2020 taxes, as well as any bank statements or brokerage accounts, any information about your investments before you start this for both yourself and the student. So if you don't have your taxes for 2020 yet, just hit the pause button, go get your 20 taxes, because I'm going to go through this whole thing for you guys, as well as for the students as well. If they had taxes in 2020, have those on hand. And of course, any savings accounts information, any investment account information. Doesn't have to be exact numbers. You can just have written down rough ideas of what they are, because we're going to need those because we're filling out this entire form here today. And that being said, do is just go right down to the bottom, click on the continue button, and we start the actual FAFSA form. Now, this is the first page of the FAFSA form, by the way. That you can see my name, social. It's not actually my birthday, but I had to use a younger birthday to esteem myself from a student, so I can fill this form out, showing you guys how to do this. Throughout this entire form, if you guys get overwhelmed at any point in time, please, up here is the save button. Please click this button up here after every 2 or 3 pages, because of the fact that the site keeps crashing. Many of you over the first couple of days have been receiving these error messages I just put on the screen. There's about 5 or 6 different ones of these error messages out there, and it's making it that some of them, that if you've done, let's say, half the FAFSA or close to all the FAFSA, and the site gives you one of these error messages, it erases everything you guys have done. The easiest thing you guys can do to kind of save time so you don't have to do the form all over again before, if one of these error messages does happen to you, and it's happening to a lot of families, unfortunately, please hit the save button every 2 or 3 pages that we're going through. I remind you as well. That way you don't lose any information. Now, that being said, let's go down here. These are obviously the different sections we'll be filling out up here, 1 through 7. And you just want to make sure that your first name, your last name, your birthday, and the last 4 of the student social, because we're entering as a student, remember. You want to make sure they're correct here, because if they're not correct, then you need to go back and fix the Fs Aid ID. That's where this information came from, is what you created the Fs Aid ID. So if the last 4 of the social look wrong, or the first name, last name, or birthday, you got to go back, change the Fs Aid ID. Those are the 4 main errors that parents and students make that just kill everything. So these 4 have to be correct. So these are all right for me. So I'm going to click on the continue button. And then what you're going to notice on the next page is going to have the email and the cell phone number that was also transferred over from creating the Fs Aid ID. What will happen is, at the end of the FAFSA, it sends this email of confirmation that your FAFSA was completed and the day and time it was completed by. Just press the continue button. And then the next page you guys are going to see is the address. It's going to show, it's basically bringing a lot of the information back over once again from the Fs Aid ID. Just double check your address is correct here. Rarely do they ever do anything with your address, but it's always good to make sure that everything is correct with the address. This is correct for me, so I'm going to press the continue button. And the next section is going to ask you about information about how long you've lived in the area that you live in, basically the state you live in. Now, for those who haven't lived in the state longer than 5 years for filling out this form here, once you indicate no, it's automatically going to pop up a little box and ask you, what is your legal state of residency? For me, it's New Jersey, so let's just indicate, if I indicated no here, I've been in New Jersey for more than 5 years, just to show you guys, if I indicated no here, what will happen? What essentially will happen is it's going to ask you, how long have you been a resident here? So if I click no and no, I'll basically tell them the time frame that I've been here. Typically for state aid, they're looking for at least 1 year residency. So obviously if you've been here, depending on the time that you're filling out this form, for longer than a year, you're still going to get the in-state residency. The 5-year cutoff is just something that FAFSA does essentially, as just to make it easy. But that's the way you would handle this if you have been in your state for basically less than a 5-year time frame. Now, since I have been in the state of New Jersey for over 5 years, I'll click yes here. And then I'll also click here that yes, I am a U.S. citizen. Now, if you're not a U.S. citizen, what you can do is you can still fill out the FAFSA form. The way the FAFSA form works is this. You have to be either a U.S. citizen or a permanent resident as the student to fill out this form. The parent's legal status, to be honest with you, doesn't matter. As long as the student is a U.S. citizen or has a permanent residency here, they're able to do the FAFSA form, which means at the end of the FAFSA, since as a parent, you would need a Social Security number to create your Fs Aid ID, what you would do is at the end, you would print out the FAFSA print screen for the signature page. The parent would basically sign it, basically with their, with a pen, whatever it may be, and you guys mail it to an address in Kentucky. Now, if the student is a permanent resident and not U.S. citizen, essentially doesn't have a Social Security number, what you guys would do is you'd click here. Nope, I am not a U.S. citizen, but I am an eligible non-citizen. And then students would then type in their alien registration number here. If you're a U.S. citizen, then you would just click here, yes, I am a U.S. citizen, and it's just going to let you go on to the next page. So let's click on that and go to the next page here. And then basically what it does is it confirms and says, okay, since you indicated you're a U.S. citizen as well as you've lived in the state of New Jersey for 5 years, you're able to get financial aid, essentially, is what's saying to me here. It's just confirming the information I noted here, or I indicated here. So I'll click continue and go to the next page. And the next page is going to start asking me information about my education, as far as the student's education, by the way. The first question is going to ask, what will your high school completion status be when you complete high school, when you begin college in 22-23? Click here on either high school diploma, or if you just got your GED, you'll click on that. If you're homeschooled, then obviously you'd click on homeschool. So you guys should fall into one of these three categories. Now, typically, if you're coming from a high school, all of you will click here. Then we'll move to the next question. What college degree or certificate will you be working on for the next school year? We'll click on that, and it'll give us multiple options. Now, if you guys are going for your first college degree, if you guys have never done anything as far as an associate's program or any college courses whatsoever in a college setting as a matriculated student, by the way. So if you have AP credits or you're doing dual college credits, those things do not count here. So for you guys, and typically for everyone, even if the student is looking to go for an associate's degree or a trade school, I typically tell everyone the best thing to do is just click here, first bachelor's degree. Then the next question will automatically, by the way, populate itself. Then we'll go down to the next question. And what's going to ask us, what will the college grade level be in 22-23 school year for you? Now, what happens is, this is where the question I get from a lot of students, I have dual credit courses I'm taking at the high school through a college, or I've taken college courses over the summer, or I've done programs over the summer, or AP classes, or IB track, and all this kind of stuff. For all of you in high school, no matter how many college credits you've taken in AP courses and everything else, you guys are still never attended college first year, okay? We'll click on that. That being said, the next question I always get asked about is the work study program. I always tell students, yes, click yes, you are interested in being considered for work study. It does not mean you have to do work study, but it does offer you the opportunity, if you wanted, for the college to offer you a work study program, which you can elect to do or not do. Saying yes here does not commit you to anything, so we'll click continue here. Now we get to the next page, which is going to ask you about selective service. And I always get a question from parents about selective service, especially for male students. And by the way, this only affects male students, because if I click on female, what it'll let me do is go on to the next page. But if I click on male, what's going to ask me next is, are you registered for selective service down here? This doesn't sign you up for anything. This is more for statistical purposes. The U.S. Department of Education, the government essentially knows how many males there are between the ages of 18 to 35. Now, by law, you're supposed to, if you're a male 18 to 35, register for selective service. The FAFSA just lets you do it earlier. I had to do this, by the way, over 20 years ago, and I was not enlisted in any of the armed forces whatsoever. So now if you haven't registered yet, very simple. You just click no here, and another question pops up. The next question is going to ask, do you want us to register you to register? Just click yes. And then we'll just click on the continue button. And now here is an interesting question that pops up. A lot of parents ask me, does driver's license matter if you put it on here or not? And the answer is not really, but if the student is with you, obviously, and you have their driver's license, it's better just to plug in the driver's license. That way you can kind of just have the whole form filled out. So obviously fill this in, and then once you fill that in, click continue. If you don't have the driver's license with you and you can't reach a student, perfectly fine. Just click the continue button. This is not an important question. Now, here are a couple of important questions for parents and students filling out this form. The first question it's going to ask you is, are you a foster youth, or were you in foster care system at any time throughout high school, essentially is what they're looking for here. Now, if you indicate yes here, it's going to make your student, it's going to make this FAFSA form an independent FAFSA form from the parents. Now, obviously, if you are living with a guardian, or you're living with a grandparent or uncle or aunt, anyone who's not your biological parent, custody over you as a guardian, but does not have legal adoption on you. If the person caring for you has not adopted you, then technically you will be filling out this form going forward as an independent student, i.e. the parent's information is not going to be asked of you. But for many of you watching this form here, obviously many of you more likely a student is not in foster care, so we'll click no here. The next question is asking what's the highest level of education the student's parents have had. And typically you guys can go from anywhere from high school all the way down to basically college. If you don't know what it is, unknown is perfectly fine. For most of the people I deal with, it's either high school or college or beyond. So let's just put beyond for both parents here. We'll click continue. And the next question is going to ask you guys, what high school does a student attend? And they want to know the high school the student is in right now, by the way. So they've moved a few times. Just put the high school they're in right now. So I'm just going to put in a high school here. So I'm just going to put just any high school here. It's not really going to matter. So I'll just type in the high school I went to many years ago. And what will happen is you'll see this pop up, and then we just click on this little box right here, and then we press continue and move on to the next section. And the next page here, you're going to just see that it's going to confirm your high school, where it's located. As long as it's correct, just press continue button, and we'll move on to the next page. And then here, now you're going to be adding the colleges. You're going to be adding the colleges to the FAFSA form. Now you get 10 different spots to add up to 10 different colleges. Now, if you have more than 10 different colleges, or you're wondering about the ranking of, how do I put the ranking of every school in? Very simple. Once again, down below here in the description, as well as the screen here, you see I have a video about how you rank the FAFSA schools, as well as how you address having more than 10 schools on the FAFSA form at one time. So I'm going to show you guys in the video here on the screen, how you guys rank the FAFSA schools as far as, who goes first, who goes last, so on and so forth, how you guys address having more than 10 schools, because you can only put 10 schools on here at once. So I'm just going to add a couple schools here. And by the way, when you're adding the schools, there's two ways of adding colleges. If you know the school's federal code, you can just type in the school's federal code and the school will pop up. The other way of doing it is just searching by the school's name. And the interesting thing is you can do this a couple of ways. If I want to, I can just click on any of these states here. Like I can click on Delaware. I can click search. And then essentially every school that's registered with FAFSA as an accredited program, i.e. a college, I can just click away and add these schools all in. So I can click 2 or 3 schools here and then go to the bottom, press continue, and these schools pop up, as I mentioned before, in different ranking order. So I can move the ranking around of all these different colleges. Now let me go back and show you the other way of doing it as well. So I'll remove these schools just to show you guys here, and we'll go back. The other way you can do it is you click a specific state, and since we're in New Jersey, we'll use New Jersey. And what I'll do is I'll type in here, common school here, the College of New Jersey, and I'll click search, and here comes College of New Jersey, as well as Ramapo pops up. So we'll click on College of New Jersey, and I'll click, and I'll go to the top here. And there's 2 things you can do here if you guys want. Now that I click that box, it technically moves that school over. So you can do 2 things here. You can either go back up here and search for another school. So let's just go with Montclair as another school. And by the way, you don't have to take the whole school name in either. You can type a portion of it and it'll find the schools. I'll show you here. I'll click Montclair, rather than typing in Montclair State, obviously. I'll click down here. And then what will happen is I can keep adding schools, because what's happening, what you guys don't see is every time I click the little box here, it moves the school over to the next page. So let's add a couple more schools here, just a couple, just to make sure, different states and stuff. So let's go with Maryland, and let's go with JMU. Let's go with JMU, a school that everyone knows, or a lot of people know here in the Northeast. And there you see, I don't even have to write the whole school's name in. I can just put in their initials, and the schools pop up as well. Let's go for a big school. Let's go for University of Maryland. And here, another thing you do, you can also do the address. So I can type in College Park, and that's going to find University of Maryland as well. There we go. So those are the ways you can find the schools on the FAFSA form to add them in. So I'll click continue, because now I have all the schools I want. And what you'll notice is, as I mentioned before, it moves them all over. So here are all the schools. Now, if you're looking once again to figure out, what makes sense as far as ranking, so on and so forth, watch again in the picture here I have on the screen here, the video for you guys. It shows you guys the importance of ranking, how to rank the schools and everything else. But I'm just going to keep this ranking the same and go on and make sure to add here on campus to all the colleges. Now, for those who are not going to be on campus, I still tell everyone to just click on campus, because of the fact that it might give you the opportunity to get more aid, even if you say to them you're going to be on campus and then later on you change your mind. It's kind of a little trick in the world of FAFSA to get yourselves more financial assistance. If you don't understand how the trick works, once again, watch this video. It explains the trick of indicating on campus to all the colleges, even if you're not going to be on campus. Okay. That being said, let's go to the bottom, and we'll click on continue. And here it's going to ask the marital status of the student. So most students obviously will be single. If the student indicates married or remarried, or separated or divorced, any of these things, I'll just click on it. What these things will do is basically it's going to make it that the student is deemed independent of the parent. Obviously, most students in high school will be clicking on single. So we'll click on single and we'll go to the next screen. And what you want to do now, obviously we've gone through 3 or 4 pages here. We've actually gone 3 or 4 links. We've gone a little bit longer than I'd like to go typically. Click on the save button up here. And what you want to see that happens is application successfully saved. Because if this crashes once again, you're going to lose all your information. So we saved it. So next thing it's going to ask us is, does the student, i.e. the student, we're still in the student section by the way, does the student have any dependents? More likely a student is not, so we're going to indicate no. And then the next thing it's going to ask is, do you have anyone you care for as a student? Anyone who's basically using the money you have coming in from income or other resources to support them? And most students obviously will not. So we'll indicate no. But if you indicate yes to either one of these, by the way, it once again makes the student independent of the parent. But we're going to indicate just like a traditional student in high school that's living with the parents. And then the next question is going to ask you is, all of these right here are used to deem whether the student is independent or is not independent of the parent, and i.e. the parent's information has to go in. So we have questions about the armed forces. We have questions here about parents being deceased, things I told you about before, ward of the court, if you have a guardian or a foster family, those people do not count as the people you put on the FAFSA form as far as their income and assets. It's only if somebody has adopted you do they count here. Most families, most students will click on this, none of the above. If these things apply to you, then obviously you guys are deemed independent and the parent's information does not go on the form because you're an independent student. So we'll click on none of the above and click on continue. And the next thing you're going to see is the last question for independence essentially is, are you or have you been at risk for homelessness? Now obviously you understand the situation. If you don't, then what you guys can do is click on this box here. Now here it's going to give you an explanation of what they mean by if you're at risk of being homeless or you are homeless. Now if you're not sure, you can also ask your guidance counselor or ask anyone who's supporting you throughout this process whether or not this answer should be yes for you or no. Many of you, it will be no, by the way. So I'll click out of that and then we'll indicate no, the student is not, and we'll move on to the next page. Now you're going to see that it indicates here after all the questions we answered about dependency that you are deemed a dependent student, so the parent's information does have to go on there. So you will keep clicking on the yes, I will provide the parent's information. Now, if there's a situation where the parents cannot provide the information or are unwilling to provide the information, you guys can click on this button right here. It's automatically going to trigger a process called verification. Verification is when the financial aid offices of the colleges will ask you for additional documentation indicating why you are not able to provide parent information. Now, unfortunately, if the parent is unwilling to provide it, that is not a reason why you guys can click this box. I mean, you can click this box, but the schools will not accept the parent is unwilling to help you pay for college. That is not part of the process. Also, emancipation doesn't really exist in the world of financial aid. If your parents are alive and you don't have dependents, you're not part of the military, or you're not over the age of 24, then technically you have to provide the parent's information. That being said, we'll click on the I will provide information about my parent, click continue. And now that I've gone to the second page, I clicked on the save button again up here, guys, just because I want to keep saving this because I don't want to lose anything. The same thing I would be telling you guys to do as well throughout this whole process. And once again, application saved popped up. So we got the page saved. So we're almost halfway done and everything is saved. Let's go down here. And now it's going to start asking a bunch of different questions. If you want to read through this information about the which parents count, which parents don't count situation, you can do this, but just giving an overview. If you're divorced or separated, one parent's financial information counts. I'll show you that in a moment. If you are remarried, unfortunately, step parent's information does count if you're filling out the FAFSA form with the biological parent and they're remarried, as well as far as legal adoption, which I talked about before, the other aspects that count towards the parents counting on the financial aid forms. That being said, let's click on continue. And the next thing it's going to ask is the parent's specific marital status. This is where we're getting into the parent section of everything of the FAFSA, by the way. So we'll click on the parent's marital status. You can indicate now that they were never married. It's going to ask you, if I indicate never married, it's going to ask you what parent information do you want to provide, like I mentioned before. Or you can indicate here that parents are unmarried but living together, which basically means they're going to ask you for both parents' information. And the third option here is married or remarried, and at which point it asks you what month and year you guys were married. And by the way, the month and year you guys were married, it's more of a statistical thing. It has nothing to do with financial aid purposes, by the way. And then we can go to divorced or separated. And it's going to ask you when you guys were divorced or separated, the month and year. And then ask you which parent information you want to use, because the other parent information is erased. It doesn't ask you questions about the other person as far as income and assets. So it is beneficial in some cases from a financial aid point of view if you guys are divorced or separated. And the last question or last answer is going to be widowed. And it's going to ask you same questions. When did the parent pass away? As well as which parent do you want to use? Which parent is still here? supporting the student. So what we're going to do is, and now what I'll do is I'm going to go ahead and just click on, we'll just go with married or remarried as far as the family goes. I'll just say that we were married or remarried, let's say on January 2002. And I'll click on continue. And then what you're going to see is on the next page is, it's going to ask you for parent one's information. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in just a random social security number, and I'll just make up a random name here, first initial, and a birthday. Let's just say they were born on May 18th. And what you're going to notice here is, as far as the email goes, since we indicated married or remarried, we're going to have the first parent, and the next page is going to be the second parent. It's only going to ask the first parent, by the way, for an email address. So I'll put my email address in. So what I'll do is I'll just go here and copy and paste it in, and then I'll go on to the next page. So we'll fill in this section next. Now what you want to do is, when you guys fill in this section here, and you guys are going through the FAFSA form with two parents, what you'll notice is after we do the IRS retrieval, what will happen is it's going to ask you guys for the two incomes. Now we're going to just plug in another parent's, basically just plug in your social, whatever your social is. Once again, the last name and the first initial. It doesn't ask for the whole name, just the first initial, and the person's birthday for parent number 2, and then we'll press continue. And what you're going to see now, it's going to ask you for the legal status of the parent, and I'll click on the yes button here, that we've lived in the state for over 5 years, and we'll click on the continue button. And now what's going to ask you guys is, how many dependents children do you have? So if you have, let's say, 2 students, let's say it's the 4 of you guys, mom and dad, we just plugged in their information, and then you have 2 students, one student going to college and a younger student or another student in college, let's call it. If they're your students, then you put the number here. So you have 2 students, we put 2. If you have no students, then you put 0. The second line here is if you're taking care of somebody, like an uncle, an aunt, a grandparent, somebody who's not your child, essentially. Then you would put a number here. If you don't have any other children, because you just have one child between the 2 of you, then you would put 0 and 0 and move on to the next page. And now I've clicked on the save button once again, telling you guys keep clicking this save button, obviously. Now, obviously for senior parents, since we're using 2020 taxes, like I told you in the beginning, many of you, if not all of you, should have your taxes done already. It's very rare that you don't have your taxes done. So you'd click on already complete. If you don't have them done, you can just click on will file. Or if you're not filing taxes at all, because all you're getting, let's say, is Social Security benefits, then you guys can click on not going to file, which down here you'll notice is it's automatically going to tell you guys you can't do the IRS retrieval. You can't pull your taxes in from the IRS because you don't do taxes, which is perfectly fine. So we're going to click here that we already have the taxes complete. Then we'll go down a little bit more to the next question. It's going to ask you what tax return you've done. Now, most of you here for the US are going to click on the IRS Form 1040. If you guys have a foreign tax return, you click on that. Or if you have a tax return from Puerto Rico or any US territory or freely associated state, you would obviously click on that as well. But most of you here will be doing an IRS 1040 form. And then we'll click on here, what status is your tax return? And filing jointly, if you're filing together, then you would be this one right here. And what you're gonna see here, it's going to allow me now to upload my taxes from the IRS. The way it lets me do that is, I click here on proceed to the IRS site. All of you wanna do this if it's possible to be done, because clicking on this and proceeding to the IRS site is the easiest way for your financial aid forms to be 99% correct, because the IRS will literally take your 2020 taxes and upload it into the FAFSA form, which is what you want to do. So I'll click on proceed to the IRS, and the next screen you're gonna see is it's gonna ask me which one of the 2 parents created the FSA ID. Now, if you did not create the parent ID, then you need to click here, create FSA ID, and once again, here on the screen is our video, step-by-step guide to create the FSA ID. You need 2 of them. Remember, I need the parent and the student one to start the form, and the parent one, which now I'm halfway through the form, to log in as the parent to be able to upload my taxes. If you did create one, then obviously plug in your information here. And the next screen you're gonna, and what you're gonna see now is the next thing it's gonna say is you're leaving the FAFSA form, okay? So we'll click on proceed to the IRS, click on that. It's gonna allow us now, we're leaving the FAFSA and going to the IRS site. Now here we'll press OK. And the next site you're gonna see here is gonna indicate you're entering the IRS site. We'll press OK there. And then you're gonna see right here is the basic information from the FAFSA form, from our ID, which is gonna log us into the FAFSA. Now, first thing you wanna do is from your 2020 taxes is double check that the name and the social and the birthday are correct. Obviously the name on the taxes must match exactly here. So my name is Edward, so I would put Edward, not Ed, obviously. So you wanna make sure the first and last name are correct exactly the way they are on the taxes. And then we'll go down and then make sure to check your status. If you're filing single, if you're filing head of household, etc., whatever status you're filing. If you guys are filing married, filing jointly, obviously, you want to make sure that that is correct as well. And the address section must match exactly what you have on your taxes. Now, I'm going to put my address here. You guys can put your address on yours. And once I put my address, I'll go down to the bottom here and click on the submit button. Now, when you hit the submit button, you're going to get two screens. You're going to get either this screen, which means that the tax information provided, there's something wrong. So go back and double check that you didn't put the wrong address or the wrong name, or you have the right filing status. Instead of being head of household, maybe you're single, or instead of being married, filing jointly, maybe you guys had something else. So you want to make sure it copies exactly what's on your taxes. And then we'll click return back to double check. But if you guys get this screen instead, that means you guys had done it correct and your address and information are correct. And so what you need to do is go down here at the bottom, click on this box right here and press transfer now. It's going to transfer over your tax information right through the IRS to the FAFSA form. And then what you'll notice is it's going to indicate on the next page that IRS information has been transferred. So just click continue. And then on the next page here, what it's going to ask us to do, it's going to ask us to break down the two parents' income. Now, you guys are going to break this down from either line 1, your W-2 wages, or line 1 and line 8. Those are the two lines where the wages will be found on the tax return. So if somebody has a business, they would be line 8, or 1099, consulting, some kind of stuff. That would be line 8. So let's just use an example. Let's say both parents have just, one parent has a business and shows up on schedule, and it shows up on line 8, and they made $40,000. And the other parent has a W-2 income, and they made $50,000. So we would put here, for one parent, the $50,000, let's just say parent 1 would be dad, and then parent 2, let's say would be the $40,000 of the wages of line 8, or if let's just say let's just say line 1 showed $90,000 and dad made 50 and mom made 40, then you would break it down like this essentially. So we'll go on to the next page here. And the next pages, most of them are going to show that the IRS retrieval has basically just transferred over. And the next page is going to ask stuff about if you have any money coming in from essentially combat pay, or if you're getting any money from that exceeds the cost of the college through a scholarship. And then everything else here is going to be transferred over. So most of these are going to be 0 for all of you guys. So I'm going to continue the next page. And then the next page is going to start asking you stuff about child support. As far as, do you pay child support? Are you in a cooperative program? Or are you in a need-based programs? As a parent, most of you guys are not going to apply to you guys. So I'm going to skip over and just press the zeros here. And then we're going to get to the next page. And this page here does allow for some of you parents to be going to be involved here. First line here is going to show, are you receiving any child support? And if you are receiving child support, you'd have to put it here, but only if you're receiving it. So if somebody's supposed to be paying you, let's say $2,000 in child support every month, but they're not paying it, then you don't put it here. Even though they're supposed to, if they're not paying it, you don't put it here. Then any kind of allowances from the military or clergy. And then this line here in the middle does go for a lot of parents. If you're contributing to your retirement account, this is where you put the contribution you put in last year to your retirement account. So in 2020, if you put in $2,000 in your 401k, that's where you would put it right here. It shows up on your W-2 in the 12 line of the W-2. It'll show you the amount. You can just copy it right here. For those who don't have anything, just put 0. And the other two here, as you can see, many of you it won't apply for you guys as far as workers' comp or disability or veteran stuff. So most of you will be 0, so I'll press the continue button, which will then bring us to parent assets. Now, once again, when you're doing the parent assets, this all comes down to the day you fill out the form. So if you're filling out the form and as of that day you have $500 in your checking account, you would put you have $500 in your checking account or your savings account. And then for investments, they're asking for investments outside of retirement and do not count your home. Investments, we have, let's say, $1,000. And then we have the last box here, which is if you do have a business, but you have less than 100 employees, by the way, your business here, the value is 0. If you have more than 100 employees, then it would have a value. But if you have less than 100 employees, it's 0 here. That being said, let's go to the next page, which brings us to the student section. Now, the student does have a tax return for 2020. You would indicate already complete. Then you would indicate typically a 1040. Go down to the next line, and you would usually choose single. Now, what would happen next is it'll allow you to upload your student's information onto the FAFSA the same way you did with the parent stuff by putting the address on the tax return here on the FAFSA form when it brings you to the IRS. But let's just say the student doesn't have a tax return because many students don't. And what's going to happen is the IRS retrieval tool will be taken away. And we'll move on to the next step. Now, the next step is going to ask us, does the student have any income at all? Even if they didn't do a tax return, and we'll say they have zero income, because typically if they don't have a tax return, the income's not going to count because any income under $6,500 doesn't count anyways. So whether I put 1,000 or 2, it's the same thing as 0 here. I'll press continue here to move on to the next section. And here we're going to start seeing the same stuff we saw for the parent as far as paying child support and everything else. Most of these will be 0, obviously, because the student doesn't pay child support in most cases. So I'll continue. And then more information is going to get transferred over and basically just put zeros in. Once again, the child support question, military questions, if they have a 401k, workers' comp, mostly stuff that's going to be 0 for the student. So we'll just press continue here. And then the next thing you're going to see here is we're going to get down to the student's assets. Now, if the students have a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, then I'm obviously just putting 0 here for all of these 3, because usually that's not going to have that big of an impact. And if they're going to use the money for something like prom or a car, I just put zeros here. But that being said, if your student does have a significant amount of money in their names, I usually say somewhere around 7,000 or 8,000 or more, you have to put their valuations here in the same way you would put for the parent section. So any money they have in their checking account as of the day, you must put it in. Anything they have in investment as of that day, you must also put it in. And typically most students that do have a business don't have 100 employees. So this is typically 0 down here, which then brings us to essentially the last part of the application here. We get to the confirmation page. Here, if you want to, you can go through this right here and just kind of check out all your numbers, the schools, and everything else. Make sure everything you have in here is correct. Print button if you want to print out a screenshot, basically a PDF of this. Or you can just press continue and start signing the form. First place we're going to be signing as a student. So we go to the bottom and then press the sign button. So we check the box on the left, press the sign button. Parent section. So student section is already signed. Now we're going to sign the parent section. So we go down a little bit, click on provide parent signature. And what you're going to notice is we're going to get the next click on the box on the left and press submit and sign my FAFSA. And that's it. You guys are all done. Everything is complete. Next thing you're going to see here is the confirmation screen. And other than that, I'd like to thank everyone for watching. On the screen now is our contact information. If you need extra help, if you need assistance with the financial aid forms or the admission stuff, just shoot us an email. We're here to help you guys out with anything you guys need help with. And with all that being said, I'd like to thank everyone for watching today's video. Once again, my name is Ed from Principia Prep. Thank you.